everyone, and welcome to the next episode of our technical discussions here at Cloud Security Alliance West Michigan. Today, I have with me Anthony Coggins from the Cloud Security Alliance and Acrisure here in the Grand Rapids area. Of course, myself, Matt Nelson from the Cloud Security Alliance, and then our special guest today is Mr. Jerod Brennen from SailPoint. We're going to be talking about identity management and especially identity as a service. And so with that, Jerod, I'm going to turn things over to you, let you introduce yourself, and we'll take it from there.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it. So here at SailPoint, I'm an identity strategy and solutions advisor. I spent a number of years working in enterprise roles, retail, higher ed, public utilities, a number of years consulting. So now that I'm on the technology side, I look at it as kind of like the nerd trifecta. I understand how this stuff works in the real world. I understand how to help people connect the dots, and I get to talk to all the people who are actually building the technology on the back end about, you know, what's coming up and how are we baking some emerging tech into the solutions we offer. So it's a really neat gig. I really enjoy what I'm doing.
Yeah, so you know, we talked as we were talking through putting this together. You know, we went kind of through several different topic choices from an identity standpoint, and we settled in on the identity as a service. I guess let's start with, you know, maybe why we picked that. I think that's kind of new for a lot of people to think about. I think in some ways companies are just coming around to even talking about identity. And
yeah,
so maybe
we should define it as well. That way everybody knows.
Yeah, because I just
call,
think it's a
call.
pretty new topic. So yeah, maybe give us what your definition of identity as a service is, and then, you know, why it's a
Sure.
good way to start looking.
Yeah, when I look at going back to my enterprise days, right? When we wanted to deploy a solution, when we deployed identity in my retail gig, we stood up something like 50 servers that did automated provisioning. It did access management for our vendors. There was a lot of synchronization between the internal systems we were connected to. And when you look at the time and effort it takes to build that much infrastructure, let alone keep it up and running, before you even build the identity stack on top of it, I for my server guys and gals over the years,
Yeah.
I never appreciated how hard you worked until now. So apologies for that. But organizations, the trend that we're seeing with the adoption of software as a service, platform as a service, and infrastructure as a service, combined with the notion of microservices in that DevOps space of building a little thing that provides a very specific feature or function. All of this is coming around when you're in these steering committee meetings or you're talking to execs, and they're saying, look, we are not in the business of building servers. I mean, yeah, there are a handful of companies that do that. But if you go to a retail shop, their business is selling product. If you go to a higher ed institution, their business is educating students and performing research. And when you're looking at the C-level execs today who are more successful, the ones who are gaining traction and doing some pretty innovative things, these are the ones who've understood for years that your solutions need to focus on delivering value to the business and not to padding your own resume or filling out these experiences. And of course, in the time that the CIOs and other C-level execs have landed on this understanding, you've had these powerhouses like Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, which are only three of the as-a-service providers who are standing up that infrastructure we need without requiring all the internal change control procedures and all the internal spend to just keep up with buying and deploying infrastructure. So when I look at identity as a service, it's kind of a subset of these as-a-service things, but it's delivered in a couple of ways. I know some folks who do it software as a service. I know here at SailPoint, we're taking a more platform as a service approach, which for folks who don't, I know here at CSA, right, we've got a lot of cloud folks in that space, but that trend that we're seeing of the standalone software component that does a specific thing, right? Might be a collection of microservices, but it's still contained and defined and kind of containerized, for lack of a better term, is standard, right? You see a lot of apps that we use that do that, but in that platform as a service space where you start to expose more and more APIs, and you take an open development methodology, you apply that to building out your platform, you expect to integrate with other SaaS solutions and other platforms and automate all of the things so that, again, we can embrace not just the as a service mindset from the C-level exec, but the DevOps mindset from the delivery side and the operations side. So for me, that's where I see identity as a service is just, I mean, some of it's marketing, some of it's buzzwords, but it's a real thing in how we deliver identity without relying on some of the traditional on-prem mindsets.
So you hit on a bunch of things there that threw some questions into my head. So
okay,
I guess one, let's talk about, came up in an event that we did recently, that compliance and privacy and all of this was really key to a lot of people right now. So
yeah,
if we're looking at identity, which is the keys to all of our kingdoms, right, going off into a SaaS type model, can we talk a little bit about, people may be nervous of putting identities out in the cloud? Like,
yeah, it's somebody who's worked both in that enterprise role and I spent a number of years as a pen tester. I can tell you with no hesitation that if I can get a valid set of creds, I'm not going to fire up Metasploit, right? I'm not looking for some Java deserialization attack. I'm not looking for some obscure, deeply complex, highly complex attack in order to get in. I'm looking for path of least resistance. And I'm doing that as a pen tester because that's exactly what cyber criminals are going to do as well, right? If I can throw a password spraying attack against your Outlook interface, right, and get one set of creds, and then find your VPN portal and come in and just pillage, I can steal data not just all day, but until you catch me. And I know we had a hotel chain that published a breach last year that said that when they did their internal forensics, they found that the attacker got in 4 years before they found him. And it's because I can get in and pretend to be somebody who belongs there, right? I can fly under the radar, but I need creds to get to the things that I care about, to get to the things that I want to keep pillaging and siphoning off of your network. So from a
help with that problem.
Yeah, well, it's in this space, to be able to deploy technology in a way that understands the concept of multi-cloud, that understands the concept of that blend of there's still going to be stuff on-prem, right? Unless you're a tech company that's starting up with the zero spinning platters mindset, the likelihood of deploying tech on-prem, everybody's got it, right? Everybody's got some AD environment that's grown over the last 20, 30 years that it's in some cases
in
just
West Michigan, where you're looking at a lot of manufacturing and other industries that will probably forever have some on-prem aspect to them.
Yeah, and as I look, I know I talk to folks on the other side of the state who are tied into the auto industry, and you've got to be able to share information with each other. You've got to be able to connect. So the understanding of how do we deploy a technology in a way that securely accomplishes that goal, that enables a business without forcing us to adopt unnecessary risk. There are a couple of considerations there. I know without going too much into the SailPoint story, we actually deploy a technology on-prem. It's like a patented technology that enables secure communication with our as a service components. So that if you're moving things to the cloud, like if you're doing identity governance and identity and access management and embracing cloud technologies, in our world, you're not giving us anything because we give you full control of encryption of those that information, right? And we give you the encryption key. So we can't even, if you were to call somebody on our support team and
SailPoint
say,
doesn't have access to that information. So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And if you look at like the Amazon, the AWS shared responsibility model, right? AWS was crazy smart in laying down of the cloud in the cloud. And they'll say, look, here's a ton of regulations and standards with which we comply. You can share this information with anybody and say that, yeah, we've got these things covered. But they are very upfront in saying, but this isn't everything. We're compliant with the stuff we control. But as a consumer of cloud services, you're on the hook for the stuff that you control. And if you go, what's Gray Hat Warfare, right? GrayHatWarfare.com has a search tool that goes through publicly available S3 buckets to show you people who haven't appropriately configured the security that they're responsible for to lock down the files they've uploaded to S3.
That's a whole other conversation, because while they do say that, that's your responsibility to make sure that you secure your S3 and your Amazon environment, there should be red flags everywhere when I try to do that, or when when I go to do that. They should make it as hard as possible to expose something that critical to the internet, and they don't do that.
And that's a fair point, Anthony. I am not going to argue that one at all, because I'd love to see a little more proactive, a more proactive stance from them. But if you look at their tool stack, right, they've got, what is it, Inspector? I know they've got a pair of tools that will go out and look for things if you choose to use them. So they're not going to.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's all subscription.
That's
but they won't impose it on
Amazon thing, though, right? I mean, I think all of them have some of those similar ability to not secure things very easily, right? I think all of the above could certainly do a better job making it easier to be secure.
Sure.
But I think also makes it important to, right, I find this interesting because that shared responsibility model. So in my job with Optiv, we have a slide that talks about that in our identity deck. And honestly, that is the most talked through slide whenever we do those presentations of people. You can see like, oh crap, I didn't know that it was my responsibility. And that, I mean, that's, is interesting to me, that in an era where people are moving huge amounts of data, tons of applications, all sorts of sensitive information off to the cloud, we don't even know what's our responsibility when we do it. And I think this is even worse for companies that went full in on the cloud 5 years ago, right?
Yeah.
They're only now realizing that probably for the last 5 years, they've left a whole bunch of data exposed out there. So.
Yeah, and to go back and try to re-architect something is ridiculously expensive, right? Which is where we get a lot of bolt-on security. But I think if you're going to the cloud, there's a notion that there's some of these solutions or technologies available. Every cloud provider, if I look at the big three in particular, they have some native tools that will do security if you subscribe to them, if you understand how they work. I think what I'd offer up, though, Anthony, is kind of how do you effectively achieve that security? It's really, for me, two things. It's partnership and it's education. Mm-hmm. I know in my enterprise days, I had to fight for budget to get my team trained on the tools that we were deploying. Yeah. And that's ridiculous. If you have execs who aren't ensuring that the people who are deploying technology are also getting either the professional services or the training to understand how the technology works, and to have a formal handoff to say, yeah, we're ready to take ownership and operate this technology. We've got enough to respond to some basic P3, right, ITIL language, P3, P2 issues. Then that's a disconnect between you and your leadership. And I went to school to be a teacher, right? That's my undergrad. I went to school for education. So you're always going to hear the teach and train story from me, but I've seen it firsthand. When I was in higher ed, that's the only organization I've ever worked with that invested in the kind of training and education, because from the top down, it was what we did as an organization. And it's a tough pill to swallow for execs to say, look, I've already got this spend. Now you want me to throw more cash at it? Like YouTube, right? Free Code Camp is one of my favorite YouTube channels. You go out there, they throw, I just watched a 4-hour certification class for the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner. So it's the rock simple, it's the basic, it just gives you the fundamentals. Yeah. But I went through that video, no ads, no cost. And if you're telling me you can't give your people half a day to sit down and learn the fundamentals of your cloud environment, you got bigger issues. But the other side of that, though, is the partnership, right? I look at the people here on this discussion. I look at the people I talk to just on a day-to-day basis. There are a lot of people in the industry who get it and who do this, who are living this world day in, day out. And so the other thing I'd recommend people do is leverage those relationships, right? If you've got an Optic, if you got a SailPoint relationship, right? Call those people up and say, hey, can you just give me some info on how to do X? Because they have it and they want to share it. You got to connect.
So we've really tried to make that a focus with the Cloud Security Alliance of bringing people together and sharing information. And I got to be honest, I've seen times, especially back when we were in person, but I've facilitated some virtual conversations as well. When, you know, I've seen 3 people from competing companies sitting at a table after one of our events discussing a technology issue, because security is the same regardless, right,
yep.
regardless of who you work for.
And who you're sending the check to at the end of the day. It's
you know, and I agree. I think that sort of, you know, community stuff and sharing of information, I mean, we're all more secure, right? Coin a phrase.
Well, you know, the common phrase that's thrown around a lot, and I say it all the time, you know, is we're all one big blue team, right?
Oh yeah.
especially on the security side of things.
Right.
Yeah.
The more we can help ourselves or help each other and share information, you know, we're just gonna.
Everybody benefits.
Everybody benefits. Yeah.
Everybody.
So Jerod, let me add something onto that, because one of the things that's key to me that also leads to trouble for organizations sometimes is they make an acquisition of product X working with customer X, and they don't hear from customer X again until the next time that there's a PO that's you know, needs to be done. So let's say that somebody you know, reaches out to SailPoint or moves forward with SailPoint from you know, gets identity as a service as a company. Can you talk through a little bit about what does the long-term engagement with SailPoint look like?
One of the things that blew me away when I made the move here was that we have an entire department called Customer Success Management. And these people, their only job is to talk to people who are using our technology, figure out what's working and what's not, and then connecting them with either internal resources, customers, any of the, I mean, we've got a huge user community on our, it's called Compass. It's our community website where they can just talk to each other. Sure. But this, to have a team, if you look at that from a leadership perspective, all these people are salaried, right? And they've got benefits, and they, you know, when we're not socially isolating, they're on the road and they're traveling. So they've got expenses. And they're all over the world. It's not just in one region. I mean, this is a global team. Our leadership has said that is so important that we are going to invest that money in making sure that we have this team, not just functional, but that they're good at their jobs. And so finding the right people, putting passionate people in that role, it blew my mind, because I've heard of that concept is kind of like a TAM, right? A technical account manager is the one I heard most frequently, but that's different. This is getting into it, right? Rolling up your sleeves and saying what's working and what's not. And one of the benefits too with SailPoint, I want to say right now there are 1,500 plus customers globally. So when it comes to asking somebody else who's running it, what are you doing with it? How's it working in your environment? What are some cool things that you've done with like the APIs or with certification campaigns, or have you connected to this legacy platform, right? We bring all these people together in user groups, and we just had a virtual user group in this region that had something like 250 people. I heard that this morning.
Well,
where they could just chime in. And if you've been in any kind of like a Zoom or a Teams, I know people, right? Everybody's using a different platform today, but there's that little chat window on the right where somebody on screen is talking about a thing, and then somebody chimes in chat and says, hey, I have a very pointed, relevant question about this topic.
Yep.
And somebody else chimes in, and then you've got this instantaneous sharing of information. So
Yeah.
when I look at the SailPoint side, again, being in my role, they have given me more training and enablement that I've received anywhere outside of my time at the university. And even then, it's pretty close. And they take that same approach with their customers: training, education, and connecting them to one another.
Yeah, I really think that's key, because honestly, in my day job role, the number one reason why I see technologies being, and I'll send this out as a PSA to all vendors out there. The number one reason I see companies having their products ripped out is it's almost always a customer service type of issue. It's honestly, it's almost never a technical issue. Most people can overlook a technical flaw here and there, or maybe there's a feature that something else has, but it's not worth the hassle of ripping and replacing for one feature kind of thing. But I'll tell you, if you don't provide service, if you don't continue education, if you're not ensuring that your customers are getting the most use out of those,
then it just turns into shelfware at that point.
That's when they will rip you out as very quickly. So, so I like that you guys are doing that. So we talked a little bit about, maybe infrastructure reasons to go with identity as a service. I think that would equate to speed to implementation reasons to go that way. How about in terms of, are there benefits from, making those, because when we talk about identity, I like to talk about, connecting everything, right? It has to be, we're doing more than just putting users in Active Directory. So are there benefits to the as a service model in terms of connecting with either other SaaS applications or with on-prem applications? What are some benefits there?
No, that's a terrific question, because the whole notion of as a service is that you're going to embrace the development of your product with interoperability in the front of your mind, right? You're not going to deploy a closed solution. At least the solutions that are going to last long term aren't closed environments, right? So developing with this concept of openness and exposing certain features and functionalities through like secure APIs, in addition to the whole connectivity fabric, which is a big part of identity. So I think, Matt, there are really two answers to that question. If I look at our platform, and I look at all the things you can do today with the API, right? There's everything you do in the UI that is going to get you through most, if not everything, that, like, all your use cases, right? That's the approach has been very best practices, very much over the years. What do customers need, and what have they asked for, and what are they not using, what do they not need? And so that SaaS solution has been fine-tuned to look at that. But we understand that there's still people who want to do things above and beyond what's in the UI. So anything as a service, like, my first question will be, show me your API. I need to see what I can do, because I know my environment, right? If I'm a customer, I know all the things where identity has an impact, and I need to know that you can talk to all those things. But from an identity perspective, there's also that core concept of, in our world, we call them sources. It's all the systems and applications that you connect to for basic lifecycle management, provisioning and deprovisioning, right? Giving somebody entitlements, taking them away, turning off accounts when somebody's not there anymore. I know that SCIM, the System for Cross-Domain Identity Management, I don't remember what RFC it is, but people at SailPoint were part of writing that protocol for how to do identity across these other, again, hence the name cross-domain, but the ability to drop in and say, how am I going to connect to Active Directory? How am I going to connect to a SaaS application? How am I going to connect to AWS or GCP and do identity governance for all the stuff that's happening in those environments? It's a notion of open connectivity and the ability to leverage virtually anything. Like if I look at it at how the SailPoint product team built their solution, I mean, you've got name connectors. We know people are going to have AD, so there's a like a wizard to next finish, and you're connected to AD.
Sure.
But we've got a pretty rich REST API, and if somebody else is exposing an API, then there's a web services config screen you can drop into. If you need to go directly to a database, we've got JDBC connectors. And then if you exhaust all these kind of modern automated options, then we've got the option for like a flat file. If you want a PowerShell drop a flat file somewhere, we'll consume that file. And then that data all becomes part of the identity information that the solution's processing. So when you're consuming anything as a service, again, that interconnectivity and the ability to, from an identity perspective, talk to all the sources where you have accounts and bring those back to make one Anthony or make one Matt, right? One person who represents all these things that person can access.
Yeah.
That's where you get real like effective identity as a service. So it's really neat. You can tell, right? I've been geeking out the whole time I've been here, and they keep throwing stuff at me that blows me away.
This is why I wanted to have this conversation.
And as you throw automation into that, that's where you really see the benefit of that service, right? You tie it into your HRS platform so that when this person is terminated or leaves the company, it deprovisions or deactivates those identities.
Yeah. So on that, quick story. I talk about maturity. I'm a huge advocate for anybody who's doing identity of combining the capability maturity model with the Identity Defined Security Alliance framework. They've got a series of best practices. You can just drop them in a spreadsheet and then take the capability maturity model approach. That's a conversation for another day. But if somebody is at the lowest tier of maturity, it's a level 1 ad hoc individual heroics. It means that there's one person who knows how to do that thing at the company. They haven't written it down anywhere. And if they are unavailable, it just doesn't get done. And I was in my consulting days helping a small organization prepare their PCI self-assessment, right? Credit card security. They had some things that they had to prove they were doing to their bank. And one of the things is that you're turning off accounts when people leave the company. So they walked me up to the cube of the guy who did this, one guy, and it was empty. And so I asked the guy across the walkway. I said, "Hey, is so and so in today?" He's like, "No, he's out." And so I turned around to my contact and said, "Well, I'll just hit him up tomorrow when he's back." And the guy heard me and said, "No, he won't be back tomorrow. He's out all week on vacation." And so I said, "Okay, this is the guy who turns off accounts when people leave. Who's doing it when he's not here?" And I got this deer in headlights look. Yeah. Because it was nobody's doing it.
Yeah.
And so I turned back to my contact. I said, "So if somebody were fired today," and when you have a termination that's unplanned, right, whatever polite language you want to put around it, it's a very emotional thing. And people, I've seen people take over social media profiles. Yeah. And, you can do some real harm and real damage. I saw somebody, like a woman just got,
arrested for deleting all those Dropbox files.
Yes, she still had their Dropboxes, so she just deleted everything, right? So the ability to turn off somebody's account when somebody leaves in those circumstances is business critical.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I asked the guy, I said, "So if you fired somebody today, it wouldn't be until Monday of next week that you turned off his accounts, right?" And
What happens if the guy gets hit by a bus, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's so much to it. So yeah, the value of understanding those connections and putting that automation between your HR system and your identity system. I mean, it's not just a technical issue. It can have financial impact to your business.
I have been saying for years that the termination process is more important than the onboarding process, at least from a security and company security standpoint, right?
Yeah.
If someone is fired, they should be as immediate as possible having all of their access taken away. Because so Jerod, let me ask this then, because I think a lot of our audience out there is pretty immature, I would say, in terms of identity. This is a conversation that continues
Okay.
to gain more and more traction here in West Michigan, especially. I'm hearing a lot more about it in the last year than I have in the previous forever. So if you're a company that's, you know, just going down the path of going into an identity, you know, at least a formalized identity program, are there reasons to look at on-prem versus as a service? Is there any, I guess the question is there any reason to not do identity as a service if that's what you're looking for?
Yeah, that's a tough question to answer, Matt. And I had that this exact conversation today. We have uh, someone that we were speaking with who's having that same conversation internally. Do we do this on-prem or do we do it in the cloud? And I'm of the opinion that if you do something on-prem today, within the next 2 or 3 years, you're going to be saying, we pissed away so much money. Why didn't we just go cloud? Because now we have to do it all over.
I think you have to approach that on a case by case, obviously, you know, scenario, because there are things that I think will never be in the cloud.
I'm interested to hear what that is.
So I know of a very large company in West Michigan who happens to run an elk stack sim
Okay.
on premise, and it would be 10, they did the math, it would be 10 times more expensive to move their entire elk workload from on-prem to the cloud, just because of the ingress egress, you know, the costs. As those services get more mature and those costs come down, perhaps there'll finally be a financial threshold for that. But as of today, they have a dedicated on-prem SAN servers infrastructure just for their SIM. And moving that to the cloud would be very cost prohibitive.
That to me sounds like a business opportunity that every SIM vendor should be looking at and saying, wait a minute, because logging as a service is already a thing. I know you've got technologies that exclusively do logging in the cloud, but are targeted more toward SMB, SME, because a large enterprise, like you said, Anthony, is just cost prohibitive. Yeah. But I think that, you know, if you look at Moore's Law and you look at, there was a pic of a 5 megabyte hard drive floating around on LinkedIn a couple of weeks back. And it's got this team of like 6 guys trying to wheel it into the back of a semi trailer, because that's what a 5 meg hard drive used to look like. To your point, that as costs come down and as people look at it architecturally and say, okay, we don't have to lift and shift, right? That's not true cloud native. That's trying to put something on-prem in the cloud. But what if we re-architected this, so we did this on-prem and this in the cloud, and took advantage of the elasticity of spinning up and spinning down, and finding the right cloud provider? There's a good chance that they could make the case in a couple of years to say, okay, yeah, now the time's right. So to that, Matt, back to your point, I think that from an identity standpoint, I know the players in the space. Like SailPoint frankly, I think they do an incredible job at what they do. And I know there are a number of other organizations in the same space who offer similar services. There's a lot of options out there, folks, of people who are doing it right. It's finding folks who can give you not just that option to scale, but the security of it, right? I spoke with a healthcare organization in Indiana a few years back about their identity program, and their CISO adamantly refused. We were just not doing it. We're not putting anything in the cloud, because he was concerned about that shared responsibility of the cloud in the cloud. And from a personal standpoint, he wasn't willing to take that risk. And I think that, you know, within a couple of years, if he's still in that role, he'll have a lot of pressure on him to reconsider his stance when he looks at what they're doing on-prem and what they're doing in the cloud.
When it comes down to how you do it in the cloud. So I've said this 1,000 times, and I'll say it 1,000 times again. Just because you take something from on-prem and move it to the cloud doesn't mean you're fixing the problem. You're just moving it to the cloud.
Exactly.
You have to make sure that you're not just lifting and shifting, you're making efficiencies and leveraging what the cloud actually is.
Everybody watching this video, so to Anthony's point, Go out and look at any architecture training you have on the cloud platforms that you're using today, and look for the term of like cloud native, because Anthony, you're spot on. It's a different architecture mindset. It's not picking up and moving. It's, if I could build it fresh today, knowing what I know now and having these resources available, what would it look like? And then making a decision about whether or not it makes sense to do it, cost and resources and such. But yeah, that cloud native mindset, it's taken me a while to adjust, and organizations that haven't made that shift yet have a real opportunity to improve a lot if they look for ways to leverage that.
Yes. So Jerod, from a SailPoint perspective specifically, whether that's on-prem or as a service, is there any full feature set, regardless of which way you do it? If you go down SailPoint as a service, you have the exact same feature set, more feature set, less. Talk through that a little bit.
No, if I look at how our product management team approaches development, it's really about capabilities. It's thinking like the customer who's actually using the technology. What's the business problem they're trying to solve? What's the thing that they need that technology to accomplish? And then once we have an understanding of what the customers are trying to accomplish, they've taken that back, internalized, and say, okay, based on different deployment models, how would we deliver that service to the customer? So there is the, you know, if I look at our SaaS platform, right, it is not that lift and shift, Anthony, like you mentioned, right? Our dev team didn't say, let's just deploy this in AWS and call it SaaS.
Oh, SaaS.
No, that's a terrible idea.
Yeah.
That's putting you in a bad way when you have to go through upgrades, all the benefits you get of that. But even if somebody came to us and said, look, we appreciate that, we have the same use cases, right? We have the same things we're trying to accomplish, but we'd rather do on-prem, but maybe we want to have it hosted in the cloud, and we want to have a partner, like we want to have an Optiv keep it up and running for us. We can deliver the capability that way. We don't dictate to our customers, you have to do it this way. And we don't hide from the customers, you know, it's what it looks like to you outside, but, you know, behind the curtain, it's really something different. No, we like to figure out what's appropriate for the customer based on their capabilities, their risk appetite, and, you know, just their internal cloud strategy. And then we have different delivery options. But I think the trend you're going to see over the coming years, though, is just an increased adoption in SaaS. Software as a service, and not just SaaS, but platform, right? Thinking of your technology sets as being a connected ecosystem where they're all sharing the necessary information with each other to get that full automation, to get us out of the business of trying to keep up with just making this stuff work and focus on what we're trying to deliver to our customers.
Yeah, I think that's another good message to all vendors as well. If your customers are spending too much time just keeping your system up and running, they're going to find something else and replace you. So yeah, so another tip to all the development teams out there. So I just have one more question in terms of, you know, again, I think a lot of our audience is in some of those beginning phases of identity, and so maybe this isn't necessarily identity as a service question of more, you know, I want to get started down this path. What are some first steps that I should take in terms of getting my company, my organization, maybe even communicating the importance of this to my leadership? We talk about, you got to talk to the business, you got to talk to, right? This came up in our event yesterday. We were all joking about it, like, oh, we hear this all the time, but it is critical that we learn how to talk to the business about why we're doing stuff. So talk about that for a few minutes. If you're someone that wants to implement identity, a formalized identity program inside of your organization, how do you talk to the business about that?
No, that's a tricky one for a lot of people, myself included. So I'm an introvert through and through. When I do public talks and I'm out in a crowd, I immediately go headphones and whiskey and dark room when I'm done, because I got to come down from all that interaction. And that's one of the appeals of working in IT and InfoSec, is that we're at a laptop and we're behind a screen and we don't have to get out and socialize and talk to people.
Right.
But what you just said, Matt, is key, because that's exactly how you move these programs forward. You get out and talk to people. One of the things
that's the perceived, like I had a conversation with a family member who wanted to get into IT, and I'm like, why do you want to get into IT? And they're like, well, because I don't really like dealing with people, and I just want to sit on my computer and work. I was like, look, that's not how this works. You
like clerks, right?
will be talking with people, whether you're at a help desk, taking calls, or you're a programmer who needs to, correctly convey, what the project looks like to your customer. It just, that's not how it works. So that
you're right.
So I've got a technology degree and a business degree. I use the skills I learned in my business degree in my job a million times more than I use my technology.
Right. Because we need to be talking, and we, yesterday we were talking to your business about the changes you want to make.
Yeah.
We need to be not talking to our businesses. We need to be talking with them and having the conversation to understand,
instead of waxing poetic,
how this is going to impact them. Because at the end of the day, they're writing your check.
We're gonna put a panel together for this.
You need to get out of your security or your IT bubble and think this is the problem that I'm trying to solve. This is the thing I need. You need to think, what is this doing for the business, and how does this help them? Because at the end of the day, the business is going to win. Whenever
absolutely, every time
making those decisions. So you need to be able to talk with them about this.
So I develop a lot of courses with LinkedIn Learning. I've got a course in their library now on some basic security 101, like how to do security testing in different, like what's a compliance assessment versus a risk assessment versus a pen test, and helping people understand the distinctions. I've got 2 courses on AppSec testing. But one of the courses, they hit me up and said, Jerod, we want you to do a soft skills for InfoSec Pros course. Just spend an hour talking to people about the stuff that isn't ones and zeros, that is about getting out and talking to people. So I've got a whole hour on that. I tell you, here, I'll do this. I'll go out on my LinkedIn profile and share it as like a free course.
Yeah.
And so if you go to my LinkedIn profile and look through my post history, if you click on that link, you'll be able to see it for free.
So
they're giving something.
We'll put it, if you want to send me the link to it as well, we'll put it in the details of the YouTube.
Perfect.
Here when we
Perfect. Yeah, I'll do that. But one thing I think, excuse me, that everybody can do, I talked about that concept of a maturity assessment and the Identity Defined Security Alliance. The value of doing even a self-assessment, right? I would go to a larger, like an Optiv, for a more in-depth assessment, but to just take stock of where you are and say, this is how well we're doing today, but this is how well leadership wants us to do. And showing a delta between those numbers on a control by control basis. That's where the IDSA framework will give you like almost 30 specific things you can ask. Are we doing this the way leadership wants us to do it? And that, Anthony, that's the looking at it from their point of view, right? The business wants this. How well are we executing? When you go through that self-assessment, even if it's just like the person watching this video, if it's just you with nobody else in the room, when you take the results of that and share it with somebody else, share it with your leadership, share it with somebody in a line of business, share it with HR, and say, this is what we think we should be doing, and this is how well we're doing. Is that okay? If somebody has a passion for improving things that all come back to identity, the answer is going to be, well, no, that's not okay. And you can say, yeah, I thought you'd say that. I really want to improve it. I just don't have the resources I need to do it. I don't have the executive support to help me make these changes through the organization. And as soon as you have that conversation, it stops being your problem and they take ownership of it. And now it's not you on the security side saying, we have to do this identity stuff. It's the business saying, why aren't we doing this identity stuff better? And if you want to get support from the top down, if you want to make rapid, effective changes, get a lot of quick wins that you can build that program on, that's how you get that line of dialogue, is you help them understand from their point of view what that stuff is and why it's important. And then let them take ownership, because they want it to be better as much as you do. You just need some mechanism that lets you both talk the same language, speak the same language. So yeah, that maturity self-assessment, cannot recommend it enough.
So fantastic stuff. A quick time check. We blew way past our original half an hour intent, but I think that's because this conversation is so good. So Jerod, I really appreciate you doing this. I'm super looking forward to your CloudCon presentation coming up in August. You know, we'll put contact information in the details of the YouTube video.
Perfect.
You know, and as always, we'll continue having these conversations. Anthony, thanks for jumping in today and joining as well. Everyone watching, please like, subscribe, share, all that, you know, fun YouTube kind of stuff. And again, appreciate the time, and we'll talk to everyone later. Thanks.
Cool. Thanks, guys.